Oh, Hare Krishna. So we're continuing our reading from various places in Srila Prabhupada's books about the topic of death, leaving the body, what is death, how we prepare for it, how to see it, not in a fearful way, but to see it as an impetus. And I think we can all agree that if we were like the demigods who lived so long that death was so out of our mind, it would be harder to be Krishna conscious. And we've heard Prabhupada say that the demigods are lined up. They want to take part in Mahaprabhu's movement. And that, because their lifespan is so long and the level of enjoyment is so high, it's very difficult for them, as we could imagine. And we were saying that somehow or other it seems that when things are difficult, it's some of the times we most seriously chant. And we had mentioned that Prabhupada said that without some suffering or misery, there wouldn't be an impetus in our neophyte state. There wouldn't be an impetus, because that's before there's attachment or taste. That's impetus comes from suffering. So, and then we described how the pure devotee is always with Krishna. Therefore, they do not have the desire for liberation. They're already liberated. And then we described that we have to act according to our level. We can't imitate that level. And then I had mentioned a few days prior that sometimes this question comes up: should I just desire to serve Krishna in any situation? Or should I desire to go back to Godhead? And then, I don't know if you remember, but a few days back when the question was asked, that I said that if you have to ask that question, then it indicates that you should desire to go back to Godhead. Because if you were liberated, you wouldn't ask the question, because you would just naturally be happy wherever Krishna sends you and whatever Krishna wants, and like that. But still, at the same time, when a devotee gets warning of death, he prepares to die in Krishna consciousness. So it's not that he doesn't. But at the same time, we saw with Prabhupada, he was doing service right till the end. So he was, seeing Krishna with Krishna. And his bhajan, as someone said, his bhajan was service. So I'm just trying to look at where we left off. Kamaniya, where did we leave off? Do you remember the last thing we read? Was the last thing 118.4? Do you remember? Bhagavad Gita 8.8. Bhagavad Gita 8.8 was the last thing we read? Really? Okay. So, that's the last thing we read. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path. He, O Partha, is sure to reach me. That's the last thing we read, or that's the first thing we're supposed to read today? Let me know. So then I spoke yesterday a little bit, maybe more than a little bit, about the need to act according to your realization. And if we're not acting according to our realization, then we're imitating, or it's artificial. It's not real for us. So we have to act according to our realization. And then, as we advance in Krishna consciousness, there'll come a point, hopefully, when we're so Krishna conscious that naturally the question of should I desire to go back to Godhead or not won't arise, because when these miseries push us towards Krishna, it means they're pushing us away from our attachments. When we're more advanced, those attachments are not really there, or they're not very strong. So it's not like we need the misery to push us away, because our attachment to Krishna is strong enough that becomes where our consciousness is focused. And so the being a little obsessed, as sometimes we can become with how bad the world is, it only, as I said, it only inspires us to preach. It's not like an impetus, oh, I want to leave this world, it's so bad. And I had mentioned that although Prabhupada philosophically spoke about the nature of the world, you never saw personally that he was saying, oh, it's so bad, I want to get out of the world. But we could see he just wanted to serve Krishna in any condition. So that's why I said that when you're on that level, you wouldn't ask the question, because your realization would be, I just want to serve Krishna. But when we're not on that level, then yes, the sufferings of this world are reminders of the condition we're in. I'd given a talk yesterday, a few hours after this class, to the devotees in Scotland, and they wanted me to speak about what we could learn from the coronavirus. And of course, one of the things we can learn is that the miseries of the world that we read about on the pages of our Shastra and we read about in the newspaper, which we often don't experience personally or not regularly, they're real, and we're being reminded of that. And for many of us, that really helps. It's really important. But those who are more advanced, they don't need that. It's not necessarily an impetus to be more Krishna conscious. Their impetus is coming more from their attraction to Krishna. But it is a reminder, as well as an impetus, that people are suffering and we want to help them. So it acts differently. And so the answer to the question, should I desire to go back to Godhead, if that is what you need, if that helps you, if your attachments to this world are such that is beneficial, yes. And if you're beyond that, attracted to Krishna, then it's not really natural for you to think that way. You just think, how can I serve? Okay? So, Kamaniya. Okay? Next verse. Next verse is above. Next verse is the last one we did. Yeah. Okay, so 8:8. So we're reading now from the series of verses from the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, which are about remembering Krishna and leaving the body at the time of death. These are like the classic verses. And Gita gives philosophy, then you go to Bhagavatam, and then you get the stories of the people applying the philosophy, like Bhishma Dev, who waited so he could see Krishna. In Samadhi, Parikshit Maharaj, who went into Samadhi hearing Bhagavatam from Sukadeva Goswami. So perfectly Krishna consciousness, perfectly prepared. So, Bhagavad Gita chapter 8, text 8. And Ramani already put it up, so if you go back, you can see that verse. He who meditates on me, well, you don't have to go back, she put it forward again. He who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, doesn't meditate on me as Brahman or Paramatma, but for us as Sham Sundar, the mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, Hioprita, is sure to reach me. So one way we can understand this verse or comment on this verse is that Krishna is giving an assurance that if you want me and you practice bhakti and you make every effort to be conscious of me, I will arrange it so that you will achieve me, because that's what you want, and your desire is backed up by your practice. Then I think this is very reassuring, it's very soothing that Krishna will reciprocate with us in such a way that if this is what we want and it's backed up by our effort, he guarantees you will remember me. Now, aside from the rasa of that, Krishna reciprocating, we could also see it in terms of a law. If you remember anything in this world, that's what you achieve in your next life. So why would it be any different remembering Krishna? All right, I remember Jad Bharat remembers a deer, he becomes a deer. And Jamil remembers his son who has the name Narayan, and he becomes purified. And the materialistic man, or Paranjana, remembers his wife, he becomes a woman. So if I remember Krishna, then I don't become Krishna, but I become liberated eternally. I achieve Krishna, which means I get out of the material world. Real liberation. So then we have these two things going on. Krishna's saying, don't worry, if you want me, you'll get me. But at the same time, to understand it more from a scientific perspective, not just based on faith, but whatever you want, that's what you're going to get. So it's no different with me. So I think that's important. Right? You agree? It's reassuring to know that, or it's just another angle of vision, that whatever we die thinking of, that's what we'll get. So why would it be any different with Krishna? Right? So it's not, it's not like, well, will I really get Krishna? Do I need the faith and so on? And now we can see Krishna stating it as a fact, that that's how it works. Whatever the mind's attached to, that's where you go. Okay, I'm going down. Right. The first verse of this day was the last verse of the previous day, yeah. Whatever you go to sleep remembering, you will wake up. Whenever you die remembering, you will wake up with that thought in your next life. Hare Krishna. Sometimes people don't believe in the next life you could become an animal. And they say, well, somebody's got to become the animal, right? And it's not just haphazard. And if you analyze the bodies of animals, you see that different animals have different natures and fulfill different desires and needs. So it makes sense that those suits, so to speak, of those different forms are available for those who want to live that particular way. Okay. So we're going to go to 8-9. Bhagavad Gita 8-9, the next verse, and we're going to read a little bit we'll read the verse and a little bit from the purport. And I titled this, Without Practice of Remembering Krishna in Life, We Won't Remember Him at Death. And of course, this has been a big theme, which I don't think we could overemphasize. I think some things in Krishna consciousness we need to emphasize again and again, because we need to get them in our psyche deeply situated so that it becomes kind of a theme of life. We have a question here. we encourage worshippers to look at everything through the Shastra. On the other hand, we know the statement, it's got translated from Polish. Be first aware and then be aware of Krishna. First be conscious and then Krishna conscious. And here we also need to know where and what situation we are in. Knowledge of coronavirus around the world is evolving all the time. Everyone has their own zero level regarding the level of demand for knowledge about the contemporary situation. How to properly understand it, how to find a balance of absorbing knowledge of Shastra and knowledge of the current situation. Well, why do we need to know about the coronavirus? We need to know about it to protect ourselves. Do we need to know extensively about it? If so, maybe it's just entertainment value. And then, naturally, the devotee has to think, if I need to know about something beyond, it's just my personal need, beyond what is actually practical, then I'm absorbing my mind in that. I was giving an example yesterday in class, and I'll share it with you. Lord Chaitanya said, the heart, or the seed of consciousness, you could call it the heart or the mind, but we use the heart because, let's just say, the heart is the seed of thought. Lord Chaitanya said, the heart is a sacred place, and we shouldn't allow anything in the heart that would destroy the sacredness of our thinking process. So I said, well, let's imagine within our heart we have a throne. And that is the throne where we want Krishna to sit. But if we allow something else to sit there, then either the throne is contaminated, or either there's no room for Krishna to sit, or it shows Krishna that he's not wanted because there's so little room for him. And then I was saying, what do you put in your heart? I mean, we were talking about the example of someone who hurts you, and then you're upset with them and you're thinking about them. So now you have to say, Krishna, I'm going to have to take you off the throne because I want to put this person who hurt me on the throne, because now that's absorbing me. And I want to get them on the throne, and I'm going to take out my arrows and I'm going to shoot them. That's what I want to do right now. So I'm sorry, you're going to have to get off my throne. And I thought that was a good analogy because that's actually what's happening. You know, Krishna is meant to be on the throne of our heart. And we had been discussing this, what Prabhupada said, how the whole point is to remember Krishna. So years ago, there was a huge court case with a football star, and he was accused of killing his wife or his former wife. So because he was such a popular personality, one of the most popular football players, this was sensationalized, and it was being televised, live court, and the whole country was absorbed in it. And there was one teacher who was speaking, and he's not a devotee, he's an impersonalist. But often when you hear him speak, it sounds a bit like he's a devotee, because before you get to the impersonal concept, many of the principles are the same in Krishna consciousness as they are in other traditions. And one thing he said that stood out, which I think is very important for this discussion, he said, I ask you, stop tuning into this court case. This court case is absorbing the minds of our country, people in our country, and it's unhealthy for us. So we could say the same thing about the coronavirus. We need to know, like Upanishad says, you need to know, it calls it ignorance. Ignorance means material knowledge. You need material knowledge as a basis for your bhakti. So we need to know what we need to know, but we want to keep Krishna on the throne. And if we become too absorbed out of our own specific interest in hearing other things of this world, then it's like saying, Krishna, can I move you off the throne for a while because I'm really interested in hearing this or watching this movie or seeing this? And no problem if watching this, hearing this, seeing this is going to help you in your bhakti. But if it's not, and if it's just, well, I like to do this, then it's the visual we should have at that point is, I'm asking Krishna to move off the throne of my heart and put something else there, whatever it is. Now, recently I've been listening to some talks, some discussions of devotees, and they're talking for an hour, hour and a half. And they're bringing up points, some points which are not clearly understood, some points where there's some controversy, some points which are just esoteric, and basically kind of threadbare discussions, just discussing it from all points of view, from all angles. And they do a fair amount of research before they begin talking. So they're not just speaking, but they're bringing in shastric evidence of other acharyas' comments and present acharyas, what they've said. And I've watched in the last maybe 3-4 days, I've watched, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 hours of these discussions, which I find to be very interesting in the sense that when the discussion begins, it's an issue where maybe the people who are listening need to learn more about, or don't know everything about, or may acknowledge, I don't know anything about this. And so it piques your interest and it absorbs your mind. So the conversations are very absorbing. And so that's what we're supposed to be absorbed in, things which stimulate our bhakti. And so it's very easy to become absorbed in what's going on in this world. Whether, even just if you want to buy something, you can read reviews after reviews and watch video reviews and read text reviews and call the store and ask. Even you can get very, very absorbed. And sometimes I've seen devotees do that. And then they get very absorbed in trying to find the best price. And sometimes you realize, okay, it's just gone too far. You know, whether I pay $10 more or less for this, it's not worth expending all my time on this and being absorbed. I need to stop it. So I think that's the answer to the question. You absorb your mind in something as is necessary up to the point, and when beyond that point, when it's not necessary, then we have to relinquish that. That's the idea. Otherwise, it just becomes a kind of, mental sense gratification that I want to read about this or hear about this or see about this. And there's nothing wrong with that if it's practical, if you can use it in Krishna's service, if Krishna stays on your throne. But if you have to pull Krishna off the throne of your heart, that's not what we want to do. And just to reiterate, although you didn't ask the question that I answered yesterday with the devotees in London, but it was a question about criticizing, and it was a question about relationships. And so I was saying, do you really want to focus your mind and attention on something that would necessitate pulling Krishna off the throne and putting someone else on the throne and then attacking and destroying them? Is that really what you want to do with your mind and consciousness? And of course, in a sober moment, we would all say no, but we do it anyway. So I think this analogy can help us, and I hope that answered your question. Mm-hmm. This devotee said, maybe the coronavirus happened so we could listen to classes. I'm not the only one. There's so many people giving classes. In the book, oh yeah, so regarding the book, Kat is willing to organize it. And one of the things that would be nice to research is if you have any stories, or you know anyone who has stories, where they were in situations where they thought they were going to die. It could be a car accident, It could be a disease. I mean, sometimes devotees say, yeah, I was so sick, I thought I was going to die. And what was their realization? What was going on in their mind? I think that would really be good. To find people that actually had near-death experiences, like who left their body in a traumatic accident or during an operation, is probably something we would have to get on Google. It's not so common. Or research it in books. But as far as devotees' experience, a few years ago I was in Vrindavan and I choked on something and it got caught in my throat and I thought I was going to die. Once in my life a guy pulled a gun on me. Once in my life the van spun over. So situations like that where it looked like you could leave your body. What were you going through? What were you thinking? And so we're going to send all these to Kate. So if you have any realization, even if you weren't thinking of Krishna, it doesn't matter. It's just those things would also be useful. And if any of you want to do any other research, I gave some ideas to Kate, and you could also, if you have different ideas, that would be fine. If you want to do some research in preparation for this, which would be studying about the death process, it's documented because people go through stages. We want to study that. And then, of course, study the Shastra and all the different stories of the great devotees leaving their bodies and not so great devotees, or not even non-devotees leaving their bodies. So, the art of dying. Yeah, then we can do the seminar, the art of dying. There's also the concept of die to live. You let go. So there's this part of dying, you die while you're alive, so that you can actually live a better life. So Krishna Karshani says, you made an important point that suffering from material problems is not enough to keep our Krishna consciousness going, because if we did not develop attraction to Krishna consciousness, when suffering will end there and the risk will come. Back to the material enjoyment and give up the desire to leave this world and come to Krishna. So we have to first of all work on developing attraction. I think it's simultaneously, but the point is the attraction is what is most important. And, you know, an extensive focus on the suffering of the world is unhealthy. It could be a sign also of, it could be a sign of so many things, but it's not our process, because we're not jnanis. So it's not our process that we focus on suffering. We don't have pictures of people in coffins or graveyards, or we don't, save articles of all the suffering that's going on in the world. It's not our process. But it's not that it's not our process, but ultimately our process is to become attracted to Krishna. And that's because if I think the world is a place of suffering and I'm always meditating on it, maybe that's what I'll meditate on when I die, how bad the world is, and then I'll come back to it because I'm thinking of it. It's like, it's funny because Krishna is saying whatever you think of, you'll come back to. And he's not saying that if you think of it in a detached way, or you're frustrated with it, or you are disgusted with it, that then if you think of it that way, you won't come back to that. He's not saying that. He's saying whatever you think of. So even if you think of something in a negative way, you're thinking of it. And so thinking of the material world in a negative way is helpful up to a certain point. But that's not the goal. The goal is to be Krishna conscious. The goal isn't to become disgusted with the material world. That's only an impetus to think of Krishna. Because when I look at this world and I look at the alternatives to Krishna consciousness, then I say, okay, there aren't any. So let me think of Krishna consciousness. So it's like a net that saves us. If I look away from Krishna, what do I see? I see suffering. And so I turn around and go towards Krishna because I was stupid enough to turn away, but I only see suffering. I realize there's suffering. Prabhupada tells me, fifth canto tells me, okay, I get it through my head, I forgot. I turn around. But if I turn away from Krishna, and I don't see suffering. I see, I could live in Hawaii on a beautiful beach, etc., have a great life, and envision some kind of life in paradise. Then I may not turn around for Krishna. So so the knowledge of the nature of the world and the realization of it is important. So up to a certain point. But we're not miseryvadis, where we're just absorbed in misery. That's not, that is very immature. I would say it's maybe a necessary at a certain stage of bhakti, but immature. Just like we all know, when a man wants to remain brahmachari, but he's having difficulty, one of his defense mechanisms is to talk about how bad married life is, or talk about the nature of women and how women are this or women are that. But the point is, he's talking about women, he's thinking about women. Or if he just got married, he would stop thinking about it. So if you think about something negatively, you're still thinking about it. And it's a defense mechanism to try to detach, but it's not a successful mechanism in general. It may work to some degree. If your attachment to Krishna is strong, then that negativity is just the safety net if you ever get bewildered. And then you start thinking about something other than Krishna, then you realize, that thinking is stupid. But if you're using it entirely as your mode to be Krishna conscious, it doesn't work, because it flips around on you, and then you're absorbed in that thinking about how bad it is rather than thinking how beautiful Krishna is. So what do you want to think? You want to think about how beautiful Krishna is, or you want to think about how bad the material world is? Well, you want to think a little bit how bad the material world is in order that you can focus on how beautiful Krishna is. So then Para Ananda says, but if the quarantine period is prolonged and my account is melting, my mind is starting to meditate more on how to support my family, then meditate on Krishna, then what? Well, then it's a challenge. These are, you remember we said a few days ago in class that the time of death is going to be the most difficult time. So if we can't pass a few tests on the way, then we're probably going to fail that final exam. You're in class and you're failing every test. Probably you're not going to do good on your final exam because you're not prepared. So this is just a test. You're not going to be the only one who's going to have trouble supporting themselves. And, governments are going to have to come to support, to help us, and we're going to have to become more ingenious, perhaps, about how to raise money, selling something online, whatever, or who knows. But the time of death is going to be much more difficult. So, as we were saying, the difficulties here are getting us in shape. And I think that's the next thing we're going to read is exactly about that. So your question is a good segue. Die to live, does that, Kamini is asking, does that relate to Bhakti-Tirtha Maharaj's die before dying? Yeah. Die to live is, I don't know who said it, but it's, maybe Hegel said it. It's the idea of die to live is that if you want to progress and move forward in life, whether it's materially or spiritually, there may be certain things in your life that are preventing you from moving forward. And so die to live means you have to kill off those things in order that you can really thrive in what it is. So it could be some attachment or some obstacle or something. Like sometimes a person is in a bad relationship, and that relationship is actually preventing them from moving forward, or they're in a bad career, or they're working for a bad company, or they're living in the wrong neighborhood or the wrong city. And there's attachments around all of that, but they have to give up those attachments to be able to free themselves to move forward. So that's die to live. You have to kill off some things. and that's not always easy. Do we have a deadline yet? No. Kamania is not the one doing it, it's Kat. Kat, are you online? Does anyone have Kat's email address? Actually, I have it, but I don't know if I can access it now. But Kat is organizing it. She volunteered to organize it, and so happens Kat is formerly an English teacher and a journalist, so she's in a good position to help us organize this. I'm looking for her email address. If anybody has it, if they could put it up, because I don't know if she's with us. Kat Naughton, who's the assistant? Yeah. Do you have her email address? Let me see if I can get it. Oh, here it is. Let me type it in. Oh, I just hit the wrong button. Where's the chat button? What is the chat icon? Oh, I think I have it. Hold on. Yes. I-T-E. Kite. Kite cat. KiteCat009 at gmail.com. So if anyone wants to help, you can get in touch with Kat. There it is. No. Okay, now it came up, right? Oh, she's here. Well, I put in your address. Oh, so did Krishna. Okay. Yeah. So Raphael says, wondering if is it possible to try to live in paradise environment within and outside and continue Krishna consciousness? Yeah, well, it depends how you define paradise. A paradise for sense gratification, it's not coherent with Krishna consciousness. But a beautiful environment, sattvic nature, and then that becomes the environment that inspires Krishna consciousness, certainly. Yeah. Create a tropical paradise somewhere, or create a paradise somewhere. As long as Krishna is in the center, it's fine. But paradise without Krishna in the center will become hell. Not in this life, another life. Okay. So, you have more questions, comments? Most of the people, Krishna Karshani says, at least in Poland, are not afraid of Corona. They're more afraid of the economy crash. Yeah, I think that's that. Well, you don't have to worry about the economy crash if you're not alive. So maybe some people would prefer to die, but it's a reality. But we bought into this economy and we see how unstable it is, and we've known how unstable it is, and we're seeing how unstable it is. That one virus could destroy the whole economy. So people should question. Maybe they should make gardens in their front and backyard. And maybe they should get a lot of seeds so they can sprout them and eat a lot of sprouts when things are difficult. And it's Krishna is shaking things up a little bit, so we think. So here we have an interesting situation. Sweta is saying, my husband's the doctor and is in the front line dealing with the epidemic. What is the best way to focus on Krishna? Well, Prabhupada said, he said. And you think, Krishna, I don't know how to deal with this. This is, I need your mercy. I need your help. Then you'll be Krishna conscious all day. Krishna, he should just walk into wherever he's working and say, Krishna, help. Help me, help them. And I think there's also another reality we're dealing with of seeing what we can and can't control, and he has to know. He has to be detached enough to know, to be able to detach when he can't control something. And maybe not easy, but it's the reality. So I think that's very helpful to create this demarcation line every time he sees a situation. He says, I've done my best, I can't control beyond this, there's no facility or whatever the situation, and then just accept, okay, this is all I can do, that's important. Okay. DM. Is it okay if I DM? What does DM stand for? Okay. So, there's uncertainty in the future, but the uncertainty has always been there. It's just another kind of uncertainty. And so, times like this, we should just be more Krishna conscious because it's the best way to deal with it. And if we're not more Krishna conscious, then we can get very absorbed in our fear. Direct message. Right? We'll get absorbed in our fears, and then the fears will be on the throne, and then the fears will absorb us. And depending on Krishna's protection is always the process. And that's always what Prabhupada taught us. Okay, so let's read the next one. This is the 8th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, and it's text 9. And I've titled this, Without Practice of Remembering Krishna in Life, We Won't Remember Him at Death. One who at the time of death fixes his life air between the eyebrows, and by the strength of yoga, with an undeviating mind, engages himself in remembering the Supreme Lord in full devotion, will certainly attain to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport. This is not the entire purport, but I pulled out from the purport what I thought was relevant to this discussion. The particular use of the word yoga balena is significant in this verse, because without practice of yoga, whether Sat Chakra Yoga or Bhakti Yoga, Sat Chakra, sounds like Kundalini Yoga, or Bhakti Yoga, without the practice of yoga, one cannot come to the transcendental state of being at the time of death. So here's the point. Sound is gone. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Bad internet. Sound is gone for others. Let me know if you have sound. Of course, I don't know what to do. It's just internet is... Okay, so here's the punchline. One cannot suddenly remember the Supreme Lord at death. One must have practiced some yoga system, especially the system of Bhakti Yoga. Since one's mind at death is very disturbed, one should practice transcendence through yoga during one's life. It's kind of like, I kind of look at this purport a little bit to military training. Because you're being trained to go into extremely difficult situations. And so if you're trained before you go to deal with these difficult situations, then when you're in them, you're more of a sound state of mind, right? Or it could be anything, if you're trained, you train to perform under pressure so that when you're in that pressured environment, then you don't break down because you've practiced. So that's the point Prabhupada's making. Since one's mind at death is very disturbed, one should practice transcendence through yoga during one's life. So, and this brings us back to this other point, which I want to reiterate, which is very important, because we see often how life disturbs us. And if you've ever been really upset, like really angry, or extremely intolerant, extremely resentful, extremely disturbed in some way, and you think, okay, what was that situation that disturbed me? Is it equivalent to what's going to happen at the time of death? I think in most cases, if not all, the answer would be death is going to be much worse than this situation. So if we can't master a situation here, if we haven't practiced to be somewhat transcendental or beyond duality on this level, then what's going to happen when we die? So that's the idea. And so every time there's difficulty in life, and every time we can handle it well, then we could think, oh, this is good. I'm practicing for the last moment. I'm practicing how to be stable in a difficult situation. And every time we fail, then we could think, okay, I've just failed. How am I going to make it in the last test if I'm failing the smaller quizzes? Because what's going on if I fail a quiz, it's just a little quiz. It's not anything huge. So that's how we should think. And that's, I think, what Prabhupada is saying here. And we had been talking a lot about practice and how Krishna consciousness, amongst other things, is a practice for leaving our body. And that's what we're doing. So then if we become very upset about things on a day-to-day level, we should reflect. If this is my state and I'm becoming upset or overly stressed or worried about the future because I don't know what's going to happen to the world economy and so forth, what about when we leave our body? That's like a lot more traumatic. So, is that clear? Yeah, so that's what Prabhupada's saying. Since one's mind at death is very disturbed, one should practice transcendence through yoga during one's life. So then, because of that practice, then when things are difficult, you're accustomed to be able to transcend, to be able to think of Krishna. Or as Prabhupada said, to simplify this whole thing, chanting Hare Krishna, chant good rounds every day. You'll be accustomed to chant at the time of death. It'll be natural. You'll naturally take shelter of Krishna. Is that okay? So let's go to the next one, which is the 27th verse of the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Again, this chapter is about meditating on Krishna, becoming absorbed in Krishna, leaving the body in Krishna consciousness, leaving the body remembering Krishna. So translation. Although the devotees know these two paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered, therefore be always fixed in devotion. So, what are these two paths? I have to go. Well, I think Krishna's describing the path of yoga, where you leave at a certain, I don't think I know. You leave the body at a certain time, astrologically, and the soul comes up and leaves out top of the head at an auspicious time, and then you go to a higher position, or you leave in Krishna consciousness. So these two paths. So let's read the purport. The verse says they're never bewildered, and in 7th chapter, Krishna says, one who knows me, we read that verse before, Saribhutam Didaivam, one who knows me as the Supreme Lord, Master of all of the demigods and so forth, can know me even at the time of death, which means fixed on me. So the same thing is being described here. Although the devotees know these paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered, therefore be always fixed in devotion. They are never bewildered, which means even at the time of death they're not bewildered. Purport: Krishna is here advising Arjuna that he should not be disturbed by the different paths the soul can take when leaving the material world. A devotee of the Supreme Lord should not worry whether he will depart by arrangement or by accident. So here Prabhupada's saying, we shouldn't be worried how we're going to leave the world. I think everybody just wants to dream of Krishna and then go back to Godhead, make it easy. But Prabhupada's saying, don't worry about that. Isn't that a nice statement? I'll read that again. A devotee of the Supreme Lord should not worry whether he will depart by arrangement or by accident. The devotee should be firmly established in Krishna consciousness and chant Hare Krishna. So that's all. Just be Krishna conscious. Don't worry how you're going to leave your body. That we've been discussing. Krishna will take care of it. He's taking care of you now. Why wouldn't he take care of you then? He should know that concern over either of these two paths is troublesome. The best way to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness is to be always dovetailed in his service, and this will make one's path to the spiritual kingdom safe, certain, and direct. So what is Prabhupada saying? You just engage in service. And we've been talking about this. Remember the story I told the other day where the devotee was very disturbed in Mumbai about managing the temple and all the legal affairs, and Prabhupada said, just do this. This is so important. Just do this. Service. Just do this, and Krishna will. He'll take you back to Godhead. Don't worry about it. Don't worry. We need to get this done. Krishna will take you back to Godhead. So that's what Prabhupada's saying. You give yourself in the service of Krishna. It doesn't mean you neglect sadhana. It doesn't mean you don't try to be Krishna conscious. He said, but you give your life to Krishna. Once your life is in his hands, don't worry. He'll take care of you. And so if you think, well, how will I die in Krishna consciousness? You don't have to worry. How will I die? What situation? You don't have to worry. You've given yourself to Krishna. He'll take care of that. The word yoga yukta is especially significant in this verse. One who is firm in yoga is constantly engaged in Krishna consciousness in all his activities. Sri Rupa Goswami advises, Anasaktasya Vishayan Yatarham Upayunjataha. One should be unattached in material affairs and do everything in Krishna consciousness. By this system, which is called Yukta Vairagya, one attains perfection. Therefore, the devotee is not disturbed by these descriptions because he knows that his passage to the supreme abode is guaranteed by devotional service. Haribo, back to home, back to God. Just engage yourself in Krishna consciousness. And here Prabhupada says, you don't have to worry. Don't even worry about going back to God. You're qualified, not qualified, whether you're going to make it, maybe you'll make it and they won't let you in. They'll look at you and go, oh, come on. Who are you trying to kid? Get out of here. No. Prabhupada is saying supreme abode is guaranteed by devotional service. So that's an important realization. And because maybe you think you're not qualified. Continue devotional service, that's your qualification. Whether you're qualified or not. Prabhupada's saying you engage in devotional service, you give yourself to devotional service, and you're going back to God, it is guaranteed. How it's going to happen, when it's going to happen, we don't even have to worry about. Because ultimately, that's not our concern. Our concern is pleasing Guru and Krishna. Our concern is being engaged. That's the topmost concern. So really what Prabhupada's saying here is saying, our concern is to be engaged in Krishna's service. You don't have to be concerned about going back to Godhead because that comes along with it. That's part of the pension package, the retirement package. Okay, you engage in devotional service as part of the retirement package, then what? You get to go back to Godhead. Krishna will arrange that, guaranteed. It's part of the contract, it's guaranteed. That's the idea. So we have a question from Raphael. It's a question from Raphael. I recognize how this could go on. Death, breath, off, and suffocation, next losing this artificial material consciousness. And now, interesting point, subconscious will take over. You sleep and chanting Hare Krishna, and you're not even aware. This is how I understand. It's realization of leaving the body during death. Well, yeah, it could be like that. But Prabhupada's making the point, and we've made it many times, that what you're going to absorb your mind in now, that's what you're going to absorb your mind in when you die. And I think some people in the back of their mind think somehow or other it works differently. Like, well, I may not be very Krishna conscious now, but I know when I die I'll be thinking of Krishna because that's just the natural thing to think of at the time of death. But there's no guarantee. That's not what Prabhupada's saying. Prabhupada is saying, just do it now. Just hear and chant, and chant, and hear, and serve. You'll be so absorbed that obviously when you die, that's what's going to be on your mind, because that's what you've cultivated. But like we said, you want to cultivate surfing, then you're always going to be thinking about the ocean and getting in the ocean and being in the ocean, and that's where your attachment lies. So what did Prabhupada say? You become a fish. Makes perfect sense. As a former surfer, it makes total sense to me that that's naturally where all the surfers' minds are. All the time they're thinking about the ocean and which way the wind's blowing and which way the swells are coming from and how big they are, and when I get off work so I can go surfing. It's like it's a total meditation. So what to speak of how we meditate on the opposite sex and how we absorb our minds in that, or potentially we can. So Prabhupada is just saying the tendency of the mind is to be absorbed. That's the nature of the mind. It gets absorbed in thinking, right? We all have experience. Just like we're talking, if someone upsets you, then you get absorbed in thinking how they upset you. Or you get absorbed in thinking how wrong they were to do what they did or say what they said. And so the mind just naturally gets absorbed. So what are you going to get absorbed in? Whatever that is, that's what you're going to be thinking of when you die. So be careful what you allow your mind to get absorbed in. Okay? So now we're going to read from Bhagavatam, 1st Canto, 18th chapter, text 4. And this is going to give us some assurance. Assurance that dying for the devotee is not going to be difficult. And I think one of the things that this class is doing is allaying the fear of successfully leaving the body, because we're seeing how much help Krishna is giving. So this is from the purport. And we titled it, Easy for a Devotee to Remember Krishna at Death. For a common man, it is very difficult to remember things as they are at the time of death. But by the grace of the Lord and his bona fide devotees, the spiritual masters, one can get this opportunity without difficulty. And it was done in the case of Maharaj Parikshit. So Maharaj Parikshit is an example that here's a devotee under the protection of Krishna, and Krishna arranged for the perfect death, the perfect departure, leaving this world. And he's saying Krishna will do that for his devotees. And then Prabhupada uses the word without difficulty. It's difficult to remember things at the time of death, but by the grace of the Lord and his devotees and the spiritual master, one will get this opportunity without difficulty. That one will be able to leave in Krishna consciousness. So that's a promise Prabhupada's making, and we take that as a guarantee. So then that assures us that if I just endeavor to be Krishna conscious, then Krishna will take care of me, and I don't have to wonder. I don't have to worry. I mean, like I said, if you want to worry, you can. If that's your nature, you need to worry, it makes you feel good. But you don't have to. There's nothing to worry about. You're in good hands. We have a company here in America, it's an insurance company called Allstate, and their motto is, you're in good hands with Allstate. So our motto is, you're in good hands with Krishna. So we're talking about leaving the body, but we could also say the same thing about so many things. You don't have to worry about how you live. You don't have to worry about this. You don't have to worry about that. Krishna, it's guaranteed you're Krishna's devotee. He'll take care of it. So that's what Prabhupada wants us to understand. He's giving us assurance, like you engage in devotional service and then don't worry about leaving your body. Krishna will make that arrangement. Because otherwise we're showing a lack of faith in Krishna's protection. And my concern, personally, and for you also, is that when we show a lack of faith in something that Krishna is promising, that promise, in a sense, gets broken from our side. We disconnect from that promise. And then that promise doesn't come through. You say, quote, Krishna promises, but in my life it didn't happen. Then I would say, did you not believe in that promise? Because you could negate Krishna's promise by not believing it. And that's something to ponder. You say, well, I don't believe Krishna will do this. Why don't you believe it? Because he hasn't done it in my life. And maybe he hasn't done it in your life because you don't believe, or you're not ready yet, or something where you're interfering with Krishna's promise. So that's possible. And so, Hare Krishna. Ganapati is quoting from my song. The wise never cry when the body dies, and if you know that the soul's unborn, you will also never mourn. Yeah. So, that's faith. That faith is necessary. And so, when Prabhupada is saying, it will be taken care of, then live your life with that faith and that comfort that it will be taken care of. Krishna will take care of you. In all situations, not just at the time of death, but in all situations. You give yourself to Krishna, he'll take care of you. Have that faith. And then when we have that faith, Krishna reciprocates. But if that faith is not there, then Krishna may say, well, this is my promise, but you don't believe it. And so because you don't believe it, then now I will reciprocate with your lack of faith. Because you believe that no, Krishna won't do this. No, of course, Krishna may come and shake you up and do something to help you believe. That's there also. But I would say at least we should be careful. Or we can think, if Krishna promises something, but I don't believe it, then Krishna may say, well, for you, I'm not going to do it because you lack your side of the deal. I'm going to give it, but you have to have faith that I will give it. Otherwise, if you don't have faith, I won't give it. That's something we should consider, I think. Okay. Now, we're going to go to Bhagavad Gita 8:28. And I've entitled this, Bhakti Gives Everything We Need. And so I think it elaborates. It underscores what we're talking about. Like you don't have to make necessarily a specific endeavor to achieve one thing. Because if you make the endeavor to serve and be Krishna conscious, then other things will be achieved as a byproduct. So this is translation, Bhagavad Gita 8:28. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results derived from studying the Vedas, performing sacrifices, undergoing austerities, giving charity, or pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities. So these are all different things that have been done in the past by followers of the Vedas to achieve specific results. Study the Vedas to achieve knowledge. Perform sacrifices to create auspiciousness or better karma. Do austerities for purification. Give charity to also create better karma. Pursuing philosophical and fruitive activities to, again, to upgrade yourself materially or spiritually. And then Krishna says, simply by performing devotional service, he attains all these, and at the end, he reaches the supreme abode, eternal abode. So you don't have to work on these independently. So in that sense, what's being said here is, as far as leaving our body, as far as dying, that's not necessarily something we have to focus on or worry about. But if we focus on our bhakti, we'll be well prepared for that moment, and Krishna will take care of that moment to ensure that it's auspicious. So let's read the purport. By carrying out the orders of brahmacharya, household life, vanaprastha, and finally sannyas, one becomes elevated to the perfectional stage of life. Some are then elevated to the heavenly kingdoms. And when they become even more advanced, they are liberated in the spiritual sky, either in impersonal Brahmajyoti or in the Vaikuntha planets, or Krishna Loka. This is the path outlined by the Vedic literature. The beauty of Krishna consciousness, however, is that by one stroke, by engaging in devotional service, one can surpass all the rituals of the different orders of life. So I think this is important, because it's like Prabhupada is saying, you know, if you do devotional service, it comes with the whole package. You get the retirement package, you get the security package here, etc., etc. You don't have to endeavor. We will take care of it. You're covered, right? Work for us, you're covered. We'll take care of you on every level of life. And at the end of life, that's also covered. Krishna will make sure that your death is auspicious. Krishna will make sure that you're able to be conscious of him. All these things are covered, and you don't have to make any special endeavor. Of course, we endeavor to be Krishna conscious, but that is, quote unquote, the special endeavor, the one thing. You endeavor for the one thing, and then you get everything. Because otherwise, so many devotees have told me, said, I don't think I'm ready to die. I don't know how I will face death. I don't know how I will leave my body. But we shouldn't think that way. We should think, okay, I give everything to Krishna. That'll be taken care of. He'll make that arrangement. I don't have to worry. And if I'm worried too much about it, then it shows a lack of faith in Krishna's protection. You know, there's a lot of things we have done in devotional service we were not qualified to do. We didn't feel qualified. And we were asked to do them, and we did them. And what happened? Krishna gave us some intelligence. Krishna gave us some strength like that. So death is just one example amongst many examples of Krishna inspiring us. Isn't it? So we should think that way. That why, if I'm giving myself to Krishna, why would I have to worry about anything? Krishna will give me everything I need. That's my faith. And so I think that faith is extremely important. And I think from everything we're reading, we can see Prabhupada he's not saying this, but the message is there underneath all this, that this is where your faith should be, that Krishna will take care of you at the time of death. He'll make the arrangement for you to leave in Krishna consciousness, and that you don't have to worry about how you leave your body. it's already covered because you're a devotee. It's in the policy. You have an insurance policy. It's there. Everything is if you give your life to Krishna, then you don't have to worry about all these other things. That'll all be taken care of. And I think maybe one of the biggest paradoxes is that this is happening to us all the time in our life. It's happening to us. But at the same time, there's this fear, but what about the future? Maybe it won't happen. But it's already been happening. Why would you doubt the future? That is something we need to reflect on. I have evidence of Krishna's protection, but why would I think at the end of my life it's going to be any different? There's some lack of faith there. And Prabhupada wants us to have this full faith. So we don't have to worry about that. We have to worry about being Krishna conscious. We don't have to worry about leaving the body in Krishna consciousness. We just have to worry about being Krishna conscious, and then Krishna takes care of everything for us. What we can do, what we can't do, he will make the arrangements so we're successful. That kind of faith is necessary. And my conviction, as I mentioned before, when Krishna says, Yeyatamam prapadyante, we have to think of him reciprocating with our faith. So it's a definite reality that Krishna is reciprocating with our faith. So Krishna may say, I do this. But we have to believe that for Krishna to have someone he can reciprocate with. And if we doubt it, Krishna might say, oh, you doubt that, huh? Okay, because you doubt it, then why would I offer that to you or give that to you? So where there's faith, Krishna comes to you. Where there's lack of faith, he doesn't come to you. So this is important. So I engage in service with faith. Krishna will take care of me. I can see that. I know that. And then that's what happens. If I doubt it, then Krishna may say, okay, you doubt it. All right, so then maintain yourself. Take care of yourself. You don't believe, I will take care of you. So Prabhupada's making the point here in the other purport. We don't have to make separate endeavor. It's already, you do one thing, water the root, Krishna will take care of everything. So we have a comment here. Just like the verse in which Krishna says he personally delivers what the devotee lacks. I had a wonderful experience with this 2 days back. Turns out we didn't have enough groceries. And everything... We didn't have enough groceries, and everything was on a lockdown, and no stores were delivering. Krishnamai asked me, what will we do in a few days? I told him about the story. This story, that it is Krishna's problem. If need be, Krishna will himself deliver the groceries. And by nighttime, it all worked out. Wow. Hare Krishna. As I've often said, there's a lot of fat devotees out there. Go around the Hare Krishna movement, you won't find a lot of thin devotees. Krishna is feeding us. If Krishna takes care of groceries, he surely will take care of us at the time of death. Yeah, why not? That's the faith. We have to have that faith. And there's a higher kind of faith. Well, if I don't get the groceries, it's Krishna wants me to fast today because I'm eating too much. And a more advanced devotee would see it that way. But I like that, yes. Okay. So, now we're going to go to the Bhagavatam. And this verse, this is 5.8.29, this is a verse to not take advantage and think, oh, I'm a devotee, so as we're saying, Krishna will take care of everything. But then we have to define what it means, devotee. Or I work for this company, they'll take care of everything. Well, but what does it mean by, how do you qualify for that? You can't just show up and not work, not do anything, and think they'll take care of it. So, I've titled this, Just because we are engaged in devotional service, we shouldn't think we can do whatever we want and then we're going to get the same result. So this is 5/8/29, and we're reading from the purport, and I'm just waiting for Kamaniya. That's, if there's no food, that's the pure devotee thinks, well, I guess Krishna thinks I need to fast today. I don't know. Maybe I'm eating too much. Okay, so this is the story of Bharat Maharaj. And this is the verse. In the body of a deer, Bharat Maharaj began to lament. What misfortune! I have fallen from the path of the self-realized. I gave up my real son's wife and home to advance in spiritual life, and I took shelter in a solitary place in the forest. I became self-controlled and self-realized, and I engaged constantly in devotional service, hearing, thinking, chanting, worshiping, and remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. I was successful in my attempt, so much so that my mind was always absorbed in devotional service. However, due to my personal foolishness, my mind again became attached, this time to a deer. Now I have obtained the body of a deer and have fallen far from my devotional practices. So now Prabhupada's going to explain how this relates to us. Purport. Due to his stringent execution of devotional service, Maharaj Bharat could remember the activities of his past life and how he was raised to the spiritual platform. This is Bharat as a deer, remembering his past life. Due to his foolishness, he became attached to an insignificant deer and thus fell down and had to accept the body of a deer. This is significant for every devotee. If we misuse our position and think that we are fully engaged in devotional service and can do whatever we like, we have to suffer, like Bharat Maharaj, and be condemned to accept the type of body that impairs our devotional service. So I want to say something which I think is important, maybe significant, and I've seen this. Sometimes we'll do something and it's not what we're supposed to do, and there are consequences which the Shastra explains. If you do this, there'll be consequences, and we think, well, I'm a devotee, so there won't be consequences. Or the Shastra is exaggerating, it can't be that bad. Or some devotee said in some class that it's not going to be that bad. There's some way we're trying to get around a reality of what is going to happen by rationalizing in some way so that we could engage in that activity without having to feel depressed or upset that something bad could come of it. And so the story of Jad Bharat is, it's really interesting. Bharat Maharaj. And why it's so interesting is because we always say, well, if you're a devotee, you'll take birth as a human in your next life and engage in devotional service if you don't become purified. And here we have an example of a devotee who took birth as a deer. And then we have Prabhupada's example. If you commit sin in the holy dham, or you can't somehow or other control yourself, you will take birth as an animal in Vrindavan or Mayapur. So, and then a devotee thinks, no, that would never happen to me, and Prabhupada loves me, and yeah, maybe Prabhupada loves you, but the laws of nature are pretty strict. So I don't think we can rationalize our way out of reality, and I think sometimes devotees do that. We should be careful. No, that would never happen. But if the Shastra says, or Prabhupada saying, no, this is what happens, this is what's normal, yes, of course it's possible it wouldn't happen, but I don't think we should see that way. I think we should see according to what would happen. So like we were discussing yesterday, and then Vrindavan was saying, oh, I'm attached to my black cat, I have to be careful. And of course, we would think, well, I'm a devotee, I'd never become a black cat in my next life. Maybe not, but who knows? If that's what you're thinking of at the time of death, maybe yes. I mean, that's what the Shastra says. We shouldn't think, no, I'm a devotee, it'll never happen. But Prabhupada's point is, take care of your consciousness. That's really what life is about, is your consciousness. Take care of it. Don't allow things in your consciousness that could cause you to be deviated, so that becomes your meditation at the time of death. So, let me read that last sentence, because it's important to remember this. If we misuse our position and think that we are fully engaged in devotional service and can do whatever we like, what does Prabhupada mean? Well, Prabhu, I'm fully engaged, so because I'm fully engaged, it doesn't matter if I do this or that, because I'm fully engaged. And therefore, it's okay. And then Prabhupada's saying, if we think like that, we have to suffer like Bharat Maharaj and be condemned to accept the type of body that impairs our devotional service. So, okay, I'm fully engaged in devotional service. Good, we should be. I'm fully engaged in devotional service, and that means I'm okay, I'm guaranteed. Krishna's taking care of me. Therefore, doesn't matter, on the sidelines in my free time, whatever. I allow myself to become attached to something that's antagonistic to bhakti, and it's okay, because I'm fully engaged. The Prabhupada's saying, no, you just because you're fully engaged, there's no license to do things that are outside the realm of Krishna consciousness. So that's important, because I see sometimes devotees think exactly like this. I'm fully engaged, therefore, if I do this or that, it's okay. Well, Prabhupada's saying, there's a consequence for whatever we do and whatever we think. And whether you're fully engaged or not, there's a consequence. That's the point. Okay, let's continue to read. Sorry to bear the bad news, but that's what Prabhupada is saying. Those who have taken to Krishna consciousness should be very careful that not a single moment is wasted, and that not a single moment is spent without chanting and remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His activities. By His own actions and by the actions of His devotees, Krishna teaches us how to become cautious in devotional service. Through the medium of Bharat Maharaj, Krishna teaches us that we must be careful in the discharge of devotional service. If we want to keep our minds completely fixed without deviation, we must engage them in devotional service full time. So, if you analyze the story of Bharat Maharaj, he was doing his sadhana. Everything was good. But when the fawn came and he started taking care of that, he was minimizing his sadhana. And maybe he was thinking, well, after all, this fawn needs my help, and this is important, and so on. And the fawn did need his help, and it was the right thing to take care of the fawn, but he went too far. And it was like little. It wasn't noticeable. And at a certain point, he had actually given up his sadhana. And at that point, he wasn't Krishna conscious anymore. He was fawn conscious, deer conscious, and he died thinking of the deer. But it started very innocently, and I think this is really important. Because a lot of times, we might be a little deviant and we just think, well, it's just a little thing, it's not a big thing, whatever, right? And maybe that's true. I just had to watch this movie, or I just had to watch this football game, or I just had to go do this or that. All right, not a big deal. But little deals can become big deals if we're not careful. Now, then again, you can say, well, it is a big deal depending on your position. If you're, an elevated devotee or pretending to be one to the public, then yeah, that would be a huge problem. If you're just an ordinary householder struggling and you need a little relief and go, okay, I'm going to watch this movie, all right, whatever. But one thing leads to another, to another, to another, to another. So that's another point we can get from this purport. So here Prabhupada says, through the medium of Bharat Maharaj, Krishna is teaching us how we have to be careful in the discharge of our devotional service. So, there you go, everyone. Bharat Maharaj became a deer. That never happened. That would never happen to me, I mean, Krishna wouldn't do that to me. How do you know? We're not supposed to think that way. We're supposed to think, okay, here's the story. Hello, everyone. There's the story. We're reading it. It actually happened. He's a devotee. He was even on the stage of Bob. This actually happened. So be careful. Don't think you can do whatever you want in the name of devotional service because you're engaged all day. You're a good devotee and there will be no problem. Don't think like that. And you can expand this idea in so many ways. Don't think you can speak something that is not siddhanta, shastric, something you just heard or made up or think is true. No, we can't deviate in what we do. We can't deviate in how we think. We can't deviate in how we speak. That's what Prabhupada's saying, because you have to be careful, because one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. So, that appears to be a little bit of a contradiction from what I just said, how Krishna will protect you. But Krishna will protect you because you're not deviating. That's the idea. So, I'm going to stop reading here. And if you have any last comments or questions, you can let me know. Oh, we have some comments here, so I'm going to go back. This is from Parker. If we simply focus on serving Krishna to our best with faith, he will take care of us. Do we need to make separate or particular endeavor to maintain or cultivate relationships with other people? Yes. Do we just serve our best in relationships that nourish our bhakti naturally develop? Yes. Do all the good qualities of the demigods naturally develop? Yes. Do we need to work on all the good qualities? Yes. They happen simultaneously. What I've seen in teaching forgiveness, because I've taught forgiveness not only to devotees, I've taught my forgiveness course to non-devotees. And I've noticed that devotees' hearts, no matter how much they're upset by what someone did, they're quite soft. And generally, they have an easier time letting go than the non-devotees. And we also have reasons to let go because it's interfering with our relationship with Krishna. But at the same time, we take devotees through the process of letting go. So, do I just chant Hare Krishna and will I just let go? Maybe, but if at this point you haven't let go, then probably you need to go through a process that will help you let go. But because you're chanting Hare Krishna, your heart's in a better position. You have the power of bhakti. So that with that power of bhakti, it enables you to let go more easily. So they work together. Bhakti helps everything. So do we need to cultivate relationships? Well, Nectar of Instruction tells you how to do it. There's a process. These are things you do, so that is an effort. And I would say, from my experience, just giving a very practical answer, I would say a lot of us are not good at relationships, and we need to become better, because relationships are so important in bhakti. And if we're not good at relationships, our bhakti suffers. And if we're not good for whatever reason, maybe we're very introverted, or we don't like to open up, and we don't like to get close to people, or we're very critical, or whatever it is, A lot of that is just conditioning that we brought to ISKCON. And if we see that conditioning is interfering with our relationship, then it's going to harm our bhakti as a consequence. So then we would need to work on that. And we did a workshop on relationships, and we asked devotees to look at any relationship they had that wasn't working well presently or in the past, and what were they contributing to that? Like, what's coming out of them, and what could they have done to make it better? And so then they started reflecting, well, why did I react in a way that made the relationship worse? And then started to understand something about themselves that maybe they need to fix, improve, heal, that would help them have better relationships. And everybody understood, yeah, there are certain coping mechanisms that are often used in difficult times, whether it's difficult relationships or difficult times, that are not healthy and that create problems and that we need to improve. So then you might say, well, but won't bhakti do it all? And my answer to that is a definite maybe. Because it depends on you, it depends on your problem, it depends on your level of bhakti. But the other answer is, well, if it hasn't improved it now and your relationships are suffering, and as a consequence that hurts your bhakti, then you should do something. You should find out what it is that you can do to improve those relationships. Because relationships are very important. So, I just did a video the other day for my daily videos on this topic. So it'll come out and I don't know, maybe it'll come out in 2 or 3 weeks and you'll be able to see more about what I said. But there's never any evidence anywhere that we don't have to make an endeavor to become better. And all I have to do is I'll just do my service and go to the morning program, and I don't have to think about improving myself. No, it's not like that. We should think about improving ourselves all the time, but it's because of the power of bhakti that we can do it. Without that power of bhakti, it's going to be, you can improve yourself, but it's going to be difficult. And maybe it's not going to work, and maybe you would never develop the qualities of a devotee without it, without the power of it. But, anywhere you go in Shastra, there's always instructions about how to be better. And so why are there instructions about how to be better? If I just chant Hare Krishna, I'll be better. So why do I need an instruction? I should control this, I should control that, I should do this, I should avoid that, I should think this way, I should be humble, I shouldn't be arrogant, I should be tolerant. It would be foolish to think, well, I don't have to do any of that because I chant Hare Krishna, it'll all just happen. If that's true, it's just going to happen naturally. Why are we being instructed to be controlled, to be more tolerant, to be compassionate, to be all these things? Because we need to be all those things. We need to practice those things if we're going to be Krishna conscious. And so now let's say I practice compassion. Am I really compassionate? Maybe a little bit, not so much, but I practice it. Prabhupada wants me to help other people. So I try to be compassionate, I try to see their suffering, I try to help them. That's the practice of compassion. How much compassion do I have? A little bit. When I become completely Krishna conscious, I will cry to see the suffering of others. That will be my full compassion. But by this practice of compassion and going out and helping people, it's helping me develop my compassion. And as I engage in devotional service, that compassion is going to become stronger and stronger and stronger. One of the regulative principles is no meat eating. And so you could make the argument, well, and Prabhupada did make this argument, when you become a devotee, you don't have to make a separate endeavor to be vegetarian. You will be. And that's true. We all have experience of that. But then, if that's being true, someone could ask, well, why do you have to vow to be vegetarian? If by being a devotee, automatically you become vegetarian. That's an interesting question. And it addresses this point. Because Prabhupada said, if you're not vegetarian, if you're not refraining from drugs, illicit sex, and gambling, there's no foundation upon which your chanting can be pure, upon which you could develop the strength where automatically you would be detached from those four things. So we have to ensure that we do those four things, because if we don't, our chanting will be impure. And because we're in this neophyte condition, there's an inclination to do those four things, so we have to make sure we don't do them. So we're making a conscious effort to avoid them. But when we become more advanced, we definitely won't want to do them. Anartha Nivritti Nishta, there won't be a desire. Ruchi, there won't be a desire for that. But in the beginning, there is somewhat of a connection with that. And so we have to be very careful not to engage in those things, because that would disturb the process of bhakti, which would elevate us to the point where we would naturally, permanently give those things up. Of course, being vegetarian, I don't think is a good example, but intoxication, illicit sex, we have to make an effort to avoid those things, because we have tendencies for those things, most of us, and we've come from that background. And by avoiding those things, making the effort, our chanting is more pure. As our chanting is more pure, we lose the desire to do those things. So then those things become natural. But if we don't make an effort to follow them, then we can't elevate ourselves to the point of bhakti where those things become natural. That's the point. And that's why we have all those instructions which seem contradictory. Well, if you just chant, become a devotee, all good qualities will be there. But to become a good devotee, you need to practice those good qualities. I think it's common sense, but sometimes we get confused. I mean, there are shastric statements that could be confusing, that's for sure. It happens all the time. Okay, Kamini said, I gave you much to chew on. Okay, that means we can go now. And you can go home and chew. So you can read the story. Here Raphael is giving us some more verses from the story about Jad Bharat. And Kate says everyone can email her with their ideas for the book. You can read existing material and then send that to her. Because I want to, if anyone wants to go through ISKCON books that may have material on dying, then we can use that as part of our study. Okay. Thank you all. Hare Krishna. We went over time. We'll see you tomorrow. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Then, yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. And also, we're going to do a class for Australia. Wow. I think that's tomorrow. No, day after tomorrow. Anyway, I'll let you know, because it's at a time when most of you can participate. You'll still be awake in most places of the world. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Go Premanandi.